Hello everyone, welcome to a tournament I've entered. So Donald X, to give you some context, of course, Donald X has released two new promos, one of which you see in front of you, Captain. Now and at the start of your next turn, play a non-duration action card costing up to 4 from the supply. You don't take it out from the supply, you leave it there, but you play it now and at the start of your next turn. So how the competition or tournament works, it is single elimination, and we play one game with Captain, one game with the other promo, and then the third game we will play with both promos, both new promos. Whoever wins the best out of 3 moves on to the next round. So these promos are inspired from something in German history. I have no idea. So Captain here is in English. In German, if you switch the language in your client, you'll see the full German name, Kapitan Tobias, or something to that effect. So I don't know if you know about Kapitan Tobias or the other promo. If you do, great. Anyways, so I have a bit of a different recording setup here because my usual computer is not behaving nicely, so I have to kind of use some roundabout method to get this recorded. At any rate, we have the kingdom in front of us here. So we have monastery for trashing is what I was looking at, and I was looking at first of all, okay, what does Captain function as? Apparently Captain is very strong. So Captain can function as a silk merchant, as a warehouse, or as a tracker. Usually, I mean, the earlier you get Captain, the better it is for you. So I considered a few options here. Right? You could consider silk merchant, monastery on the open. You could consider star chart and silk merchant on the open, which is what I ended up doing. And there are other things you have to think about as well. Okay, well, the draw is a bit strange. So you have Wild Hunt and Silk Merchant, which increases your hand size, but then you have something like Cursed Village, which is the only village, aside from Necropolis, which is a draw to 6 kind of village. So you want to play your terminals first and then play your village. And it can't ever increase your hand size past 6. So you do have to balance things bit here. I wanted to go for some kind of plan that involved most of the cards on the left of the kingdom here. So that would be the cursed villages, the trackers, the grave robbers, and ultimately we'll try to put down some distant lands and then think about provinces or piles as the case may be here. So that was the rough plan going in. I did like the idea of getting a captain early because you could play it either as a warehouse or a silk merchant. Of course, the tracker is an option, but really the cycling captain gives you from both silk merchant and warehouse is tremendous. And people pointed this out to me in the chat after the game that if you can use your captain as a silk merchant on the second turn it's out, and that's a wharf. I hadn't noticed that, but it is a wharf, so that's quite good. Anyways, we open Star Chart on Silk Merchant, as I mentioned before. The Silk Merchant gives you the extra coffer, right? And the Star Chart lets me top deck that Silk Merchant straight away, so I will be drawing 2 cards, and I will have the coffer. So decent chance for me to go ahead and get Capitan Tobias here. So opponent opens with the monastery and silk merchant, so not getting the star chart immediately. I do drop to 6 here, and I am gonna take the captain straight away, and star chart lets me top deck it. So that is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Turn 4, and I have the captain ready to roll here. Ready to roll. So my opponent also gets the captain of a 5 copper, well 4 copper and a pouch hand, which is very nice for them. But I'm a little bit ahead because of the star charts so far. So first warehouse here. I wanted to try to find my silk merchant, and also I wanted to trigger the shuffle here. so that I would be able to top deck something. Monastery is a must at this point, so I do go for a Monastery and a Tracker. I do have the couple buys. And I didn't know this about Captain, you'll see on my next turn. But on the second turn, the action you play from the pile, from the supply, is completely free. It doesn't cost an action. So here, I did not... Well, first my opponent's turn. They go for a Tracker and trash one of the ruins out. So here I went for the Warehouse, because I thought, okay, if I play the Silk Merchant, I would use my action for the turn, but I was totally wrong. I missed that. That was my mistake, right? New card. We're still learning it. Anyway, so we play it as Warehouse, and we do manage to find our Silk Merchant and Tracker. So I have a couple options here. Not that many. Another Tracker, but I don't really have the actions to play that, and I'm not interested in that. Warehouse, well, I have the Captain. So silver is the next choice, and I went for that because I need some money to start buying these 5 costs, the Cursed Villages and the Grave Robbers. The extra copper here is to effectively turn one of these shelters into a copper via the Monastery. Now I top decked the silver, which was wrong in a sense because I drew it off the trashed overgrown estate, and I didn't really want to have that happen, but it's okay. It's not the worst, but not... I wasn't aware of it when it happened, and I didn't do it on purpose. That's the bad part. Anyway, so my opponent has a great turn here, still without this star chart, so I mean, that's very good for them. If you can draw like this without star chart, that's excellent news for you. So 6, and they have a choice here of what to do. I was thinking they would get a Cursed Village or something, but they opt for star chart and silver instead. It's about time for the star chart, honestly. Trashing one out. So here I could have gone for the Silk Merchant play, like Necropolis, Silk Merchant, Tracker, or just Silk Merchant, honestly, and use my villager on the Tracker, but I opted for the Warehouse instead. My rationale for using this Captain as Warehouse a lot of the time, and for most of the time in this early game, was that I wanted the cycling. I wanted to be able to cycle quickly, make use of my star chart to see my cards again and again in quick succession. That being said, the chat pointed out to me that there were several points, or at least one point, where Silk Merchant would have been better than the Warehouse for the Captain. So we'll see. Anyway, 7 for my opponent. That's pretty nice. Second silver, which at that point I was like, maybe, but the Monastery is there, so I presume that's why they went for 2 things. And I use this Captain again as a Warehouse, and at this point it is functioning effectively like a better dungeon, which is not bad. You know, dungeon is a great card, and to have a card that does dungeon's job but better is excellent news. So here we go for the Cursed Village. Now it's time to get those, because I want to start playing Grave Robbers. I need the villages to draw and to play the Grave Robbers, of course. We get the Cursed Village first here, because I need to recover from any potential hex. This hex is kinda helpful, actually, because it lets me top deck my Cursed Village straight away, and off the draw here I can select whatever I want to draw into because of star chart. Excuse me. So that is that. We got 2 things there. 1, to trash with Monastery, an extra copper, and 2, I quite like the trackers, and I am kinda angling my deck to be able to make use of the boons not even semi, partially reliably. So if I have 3 or 4 trackers, I'm going to be turning over 3 or 4 boons throughout the whole game, and I can take advantage of the benefits that come with it, right? And at this point I think I'll take most of them. The worst one is probably Moon's Gift, but the rest of them are pretty helpful. Captain here as Warehouse, because I wanted again to see my Silk Merchant, and it draws 1 extra card, as opposed to the Silk Merchant which just draws 2, right? Even though I have to discard, at least there's a better chance I find my other cards. So I do find my Silk Merchant and one of my trackers. This tracker draws me a card, not the most useful right now, but it is fine. And here I have 6. I consider the Grave Robber, and I also consider making use of my buys to trash with the Monastery. So an alternative here is something like Warehouse Silver or Silk Merchant Tracker, right? And I do go for the Silk Merchant Tracker play. I'm not overly concerned about this many trackers because I do have a lot of villagers, plus I have an actual village in Cursed Village and Necropolis, and I'm top decking that Cursed Village nearly every turn. So that's totally fine with me to be picking up this many trackers, and like I said, I'm angling to try to take advantage of these boons, and also the trackers kind of work well with the Cursed Village, right? Like I could stick the tracker down, then play the Cursed Village to draw more cards. So all of these were made up the reasoning for the decision to purchase now 3 trackers. My opponent got hit with a kind of bad hex here. They just have 5. They would have 2 extra coin. If not, perhaps that would have been Cursed Village tracker for them. This Cursed Village is taken without repercussion, and the Monastery comes out to trash again, right? So I have a few more Silk Merchants to my opponent, which is good. Captain here, for example, you could argue for Silk Merchant, right? Because my hand was loaded. My hand was very, very, very good. And Warehouse does force me to make some uncomfortable decisions at this point. So I get rid of the Silk Merchants because I feel like I will be able to get back to them. I gain a couple things off of these trackers, a silver and a Will-O-Wisp. And with the help of the star chart, the Will-O-Wisp is guaranteed to hit if I use the star chart. And there are targets in the deck for it. Trackers, Necropolis, the stray copper is still. So the Will-O-Wisp is our welcome addition to the deck. And here we draw through all the way and we get up to 11, potentially 12. I decide not to go for one more tracker because now I want to go ahead and concentrate on grave robbing. I buy the Cursed Village first to accommodate for this, to allow me to recover from any potential bad hex. And I do get a bad hex, so to speak. I lose one of my Silk Merchants to the Locusts. Silly Locusts. I replace it with our Warehouse. There's not really a better option. And I get my first Grave Robber. So the plan is here from this turn now. I'm going to use my Grave Robber, and I think my deck can manage it, on one of these Silk Merchants. Turn that into a Grave Robber. So now I have 2 of them, and then use that gained Grave Robber to pick up back my Silk Merchant from the bin. Of course, now there's another one in the bin because of the Locusts, but I can't do anything about that. So if my opponent does pick up a Grave Robber here, there'll be at least a Grave Robber for him in Silk Merchant in the bin for him. And we did get the silver there, which was a nice boost to the economy, and is at the right time to the deck can now support it, make better use of it. I'll see it almost every turn from here on out. 7 for my opponent. Could be the Grave Robber play here. Their deck is similar to mine, very, very close to mine. 2 silvers, but just a bit behind, maybe half a turn. I have an extra Silk Merchant, for example, right? And I have the Grave Robber now. Well, I had an extra Silk Merchant. The Locusts ate it. Silly Locusts. Anyways, so they go up to 8 for a Silk Merchant and a gold via Wedding here. And okay, look, I considered Devil's Workshop here, but then is the same conflict you have with getting Wild Hunt and the Cursed Villages. So I ended up not going for the Devil's Workshop at all in this game. I don't know if that's right or not, but it is what I did. Anyways, I make the play here. I turn the Silk Merchant into a second Grave Robber. I get my hand size nice and low, then draw back up with the Cursed Village. Tracker comes out beautifully here. Look at this. Gaining the Silk Merchant. That was quite welcome to have that Silk Merchant. And it seems like maybe Cursed Village and Silk Merchant doesn't work as well, but there's Grave Robber and Tracker to help cut down the hand size. So here I would like to recover my Silk Merchant, and I do that just to see, or to ensure that I draw all the way up to the end here. Tracker first to see if I have to discard anything, and I can draw back up with Silk Merchant. I get an extra buy and money, which is good news, and I believe there's a Silk Merchant on top of the deck, so we don't need to play any of these here. And we have quite a few coffers from all the trashing and gaining of the Silk Merchants. So just going to be Cursed Village, and again Cursed Village first, and then Grave Robber here. So I can top deck these with the Tracker. That's also a big deal, big benefit from the Tracker, being able to top deck cards that you gain. And then, not going to trash the Silk Merchants. They're much more valuable for Grave Robbers than for the Monastery. With the Star Chart, I can top deck another card. So I'm really controlling a large portion of my starting hand, which feels good and is excellent. So at this point in the game, I keep playing Captain as Warehouse. Again, you could make the argument for the Silk Merchant since I'm drawing so much. I again opted for the Warehouse at this point in the middle of the game to better sculpt my hand to allow the Cursed Villagers to draw more. I don't know if that's valid justification, but that was the idea going in here. Anyways, my opponent is now up to 8 or 9 if they like, so I'm still a bit short on economy in the sense that I assume they would like to be able to go for Cursed Village Grave Robber here, but they can't. They don't have the money. Instead, going for Silk Merchant Grave Robber. So they got their first Grave Robber there. I have 3 of them. So I can do a lot more things, and there are 2 Silk Merchants in the bin. So again, Warehouse here. First, I get the extra action from it, and now I start gaining the distant lands. Right, so my plan here for this turn was to gain 1 or 2 distant lands and be able to put them down on the mat. Tracker here, I do decide to trash the pouch. Little bit questionable, because there might be a time when I don't have Silk Merchants because they're all in the bin, and I would like to have the plus buy, but I figured, look, the Silk Merchants will always be moving around. I'll make sure I have buys to do whatever I want to do. So I do get rid of it. It allows the Cursed Village to draw more. This Grave Robber is going to trash a Silk Merchant. The second one regained Silk Merchant, and I feel like my deck could handle even a 4th Grave Robber at this point. So I am going to turn one of the Silk Merchants into a Grave Robber. This last Grave Robber turns a Silk Merchant into a distant lands. And, however, I do run into a bit of trouble here. So Will-O-Wisp, I draw distant lands to have a better chance of drawing something, and I do draw the Monastery, which is good. The problem is I didn't draw my deck. I wasn't able to put down both distant lands, and that is a kind of a problem, because I would like to be able to draw my deck. I would like to be able to gain and play the distant lands immediately. So I noticed that I buy another Cursed Village to try to fix that problem. You see here, this is something else that was pointed out to me during the game, that I do have quite a few villagers, and there are times when perhaps I should be playing Tracker first instead of holding it in my hand and then playing Cursed Village. Right? I still do have trouble managing my villagers, so I do have 8 of them. I am reserving them. The idea here is, well, I want to be able to play Grave Robbers at any time. I want to have that flexibility, right? But I only have 4 Grave Robbers, and I do have villages, actual villagers from Cursed Village, and I have 4 extra villagers here, so I could be using them perhaps more efficiently, and probably more efficiently. So that's something to keep in mind for the future here. Anyways, my opponent gets up to 16. They go for a second captain, another Grave Robber, and a Cursed Village. So I didn't really know what the second captain was going to do. I I guess it can always be these warehouses, right, which are very, very good. Again, I use my captain as a warehouse here to sculpt the hand. Not the greatest draw to see all the cursed villages straight away here, but that's fine. So, Grave Robber turns one Silk Merchant into distant lands and the other one regains it. Not a problem. And I have another, my last Grave Robber here, which I probably would like to use before playing these cursed villages. So I think what I do at this point is pick up one of the Silk Merchants from the trash. I had some doubts about whether or not I would be able to draw everything. So I think that's why I made this play. Again, like I want to be able to trash Silk Merchants, gain distant lands, and put them aside on the mat all in one turn, right? But I'm not sure if I can do that, especially seeing how the deck failed last time. So instead of turning one of these Silk Merchants into a distant lands, I instead opt to regain the Silk Merchant to try to draw everything. And I do draw everything that I want to draw. This tracker is nice because it allows us to top deck, Cursed Village and Silk Merchant, which is excellent. That's why I discarded those cards to the warehouse as well. I knew tracker could trigger shuffle, so in the event that it did, I would be prepared for it. I do gain a gold here. I think it's a decent time for the gold, and I have lots of coffers to spend my money on here. Not a lot of buys, right? So what was I really going to use the extra silver for? Just the 2 buys, so the problem that I did foresee with trash in the pouch kind of happens here, but 10 and 2 buys is still fine on this board. I am a little bit concerned about piles at this point. I'm not sure what my opponent can do. They do have 3 grave robbers at this point, but I don't think they can empty the piles and win on me here. They would have to be able to gain all the distant lands and play it, or enough of them, plus empty piles, and I don't think they have enough gains or draw to do that with their grave robbers. And they also used up a lot of their coffers last turn, so not as much money to buy or do things with. And also on the other hand, that set of buys, the Cursed Village and Distant Lands, kinda sets me up to pile out on the next turn. So we see my opponent gain 1 Distant Lands here, trashing the Silk Merchant, of course. The tracker comes in very nicely, gives a plus buy, so that could be useful for piling out. Another Silk Merchant gets converted to a Distant Lands. At this point, though, he is making that pile very low. I was expecting him to be able to put down at least a Distant Lands on this turn, but he was not able to do so, which I was a bit surprised about. So last grave robber for him is to gain a Silk Merchant on top of the deck to help set up his next turn. And he's in a tough spot here, right? Like, he perhaps shouldn't have even touched the Distant Lands at that point. Where does he go for points? Like, Province here doesn't help him because I still have more points than him and can pile out easily. So I think he does perhaps the only reasonable thing he can do. Goes for Wild Hunts and tries to get points from there, but at this point I calculate that it should be very easy for me to finish the game here. I just need to use all my grave robbers to convert things in my deck to Silk Merchants and Distant Lands, and I should have enough money to buy the last 2 Cursed Villages, and nothing terrible could happen on those Cursed Villages to cause me to drop in points. The worst case would be misery into plague, right? And then even then, if I get plague, I can probably trash the curse with a monastery. So I am just gonna convert some Silk Merchants that I see into Distant Lands. I converted a tracker into a Silk Merchant into Distant Lands. This warehouse gets converted into a Distant Lands. And the last grave robber is somewhere. Oh, I already played it. Never mind. I think I regained. Yeah, I gained 1 Silk Merchant. tracker comes to help with the pile out too. So just a lot of help all around. And that is the end of game one. So we take game one here. It's a bit long, but I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if you have any comments, feedback, especially on how to improve my play, right? I haven't played competitively in a long time. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you.